for participating in this last of our series. This session today is Welcome to Do More and Become More with Less. On behalf of Mary Beth Marshall, President of the Illinois Workforce Partnerships from the beautiful northern part of our state, and from myself, Kathy Lively, President-elect of IWP, I want to welcome you and thank you once again for your participation. Within this week, you will be receiving a Survey Monkey from us so that you can give us feedback about the parts of this webinar series that worked very, very well for you, and then offer us some suggestions for improvement. In addition to that, we're also going to give you the opportunity to ask us, tell us, share with us ways in which we could also provide additional professional development. Illinois Workforce Partnerships remains committed to working with all of our partners. I want to thank Illinois WorkNet for Jeannie Kitchens and her team for providing the platform for all of our webinar series. IEDA, our fine partners who came to us with this idea, and again, our members of Illinois Workforce Partnerships, and of course, our presenter, Greg Newton. And it's with great pride that I introduce Greg Newton to you again, a friend of Illinois, a friend of Workforce. And please remember that what you do, what we do, is critically important to the welfare of our citizens, and nothing brings that home more than the tragedy that struck our beautiful and transform the city of Harrisburg. We all do transformative work throughout each and every day, and I think sometimes we forget that until a tragedy strikes. So congratulations on choosing to be a workforce professional, and Greg Newton is with you now to help us learn how to do more with less, which we all need to know. So have a wonderful day, and keep us in your thoughts. Thank you very much.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Kathy. It's been my pleasure to work with the Illinois Workforce Partnership and the Illinois Employment and Training Association on this series. I'm also very pleased to see so many people have attended each of the webinars, and I'm looking forward to working with everyone today. Today, our presentation principally focuses on our primary job, which is simply how do we bring together employers and job seekers. If you look on the second page in our handout here, you'll notice that we have some very specific things we'd like to accomplish in our limited time with each other. The first thing we're going to discuss is exactly how do we make the connection. There are 4 different program strategies I want to review with you, and what we want as the outcome of that discussion is for you to decide which of the strategies are best for you. The strategies are highly dependent on your local economy, on the kinds of job seekers and employers you serve, and to what degree you have resources to implement which to add value in each of the 4 strategies we review. We'll be spending time on one particular strategy, which has to do with how do we make effective referrals to employers and increase the likelihood that people will be hired. I hope today you'll have at least a couple of ideas result from our time with each other. I'm looking forward at the end of the webinar to get to hear some of the things that you're currently doing to bring together employers and job seekers. I do want to say that many of the things we talk about today may not be right for you. The goal is simply for you to identify those that will work for you. So that's what we're going to accomplish, and we're going to dig in with the obvious first. To a large degree, we are attempting to improve the labor market. On one side of the labor market, we have what economists would call labor market supply, which are the job seekers. And then on the other side of the labor market, we have employers, which we can think of as labor market demand. Our programs, our services, and our activities is clearly connecting those 2 sides of the marketplace. And the real issue is how is it that we can add value in the process of making the connection. The first thing I want to do is to make sure we have our definitions straight, because I find this to be sometimes a topic that's confusing for folks, where we use different words to mean different things. And if you look on the next page, I'd like to discuss with you 3 different but very related services. The first service is not just to make an individual connection between an individual employer and an individual job seeker, but to improve the overall quality of the workforce to help grow the local economy through making linkages with economic development and attempting to help businesses grow even if they are not currently hiring. Over the last few years, many workforce boards have begun to take on this mission, and it's certainly one of the missions that we need to fulfill. However, business services is very different than employer services. Employer services are focused on making a direct connection between an individual employer and an individual job seeker. Unlike business services that have businesses as the predominant customer, employer services really are dual customership because it is the connection of employers and job seekers directly. If you'll take a look, though, there is a distinction between employer services and employment services. In employment services, the job seeker is the in our resource room and when we give technical advice in terms of improving the job search. So if you could just think for a moment about business services, employer services, and employment services, we probably have people that are attending this webinar that do one of those, and perhaps some of you who attempt to do all three. So the first poll question I'd like to ask to get some idea of who is joining us today is that if you could just take the following poll, it would be great. And I realize that many of you might do many things, but I'd be very interested as to what is your predominant responsibility. Business services, employer services, or employment services? Looks like we have the results coming in here. Looks like most of the people have employment services as their principal responsibility. That's rather what I assumed. I will share with you, that's what really WIA was designed to do, was to provide employment services. In many ways, Wagner Peiser was created to develop employer services. Has been is when people are expected to do all three, business services, employer services, and employment services, it is oftentimes the case that employer services take the hit. You've got to remember that employers, unless invited, rarely come into our center, whereas job seekers come into our program all the time. So one of the things we have to think about, particularly if the economy is tough, is to what degree we need staff that are more dedicated to employer services. And one of the sad truths is when the budgets go down, particularly when the economy is poor, the employer services are actually what needs to be increased. However, what is always the case is that our ongoing program responsibilities almost always drive us toward employment services. So I will spend some time today on all three of these, but principally on employer and employment services, because that's what it looks like people are most responsible for. Now let's talk some about employment services. There really are three different kinds of employment services. One is job search assistance, and this is where we help job seekers find their own jobs. This is really what we do in the resource area, what we do in our job search workshops, what we do when we give individual consult to our job seekers. Job development is different than job search assistance. This is where a staff member contacts an employer to encourage a specific job seeker to be hired. We will talk later about the fact that as the job market sometimes becomes more hidden, job development becomes even more important. Job development has always been an important strategy for working with customers who are not able to market themselves effectively or experience discrimination in the labor market. That's the reason why, in many cases, programs that work with recent parolees from prison, welfare to work, people with disabilities, those that and sometimes who have the greatest challenge in job search, need in fact staff assistance to be able to enter the labor market. And then finally, there's job placement. Job placement is when we directly refer candidates to employers. We identify job openings from employers for job candidates, and we make the connection. Many of the job seekers who come into our center and into our programs, what they really most want from us is not job search assistance. What they really want is job centers. I'll ask job seekers, what did you get from your visit? Unfortunately, some of them say nothing. Now, I don't believe it is that they don't get anything, but what I do think they mean is they came there looking for a job, not just looking for assistance. So one of the discussions we're going to have today is about how we make our job search assistance appear more valuable and how we begin to respond to the employer expectation that they don't just come to us for the resource room, but they come for us to actually be connected to the labor market. So let me get some idea about how you mostly help your job seekers find jobs. If you look, I want to ask you another question in terms of our time with each other. Which of these methods do you most commonly use to help your job seekers get jobs? Supporting a self-directed job search, direct contact to employers, promoting an individual job seeker, working with employers to get job postings for the purpose of connecting people to the labor market, that really you vary the strategy depending upon who the customer is. So let's see what comes up here. Boy, overwhelmingly, it appears that most of you, in fact, see job search assistance as the predominant way that you provide assistance to individuals. No problem with that. We just have to make sure that the assistance is customer as to which of these approaches are most effective. And we're going to be examining in a moment 4 different ways that people are connected to the labor market by our programs. And one of the significant ways that it varies in terms of the best strategy choice has to do with who the customers are that you are serving. So that's useful information. And I think one of the big strategic questions for us to ask has to do with how do we improve our job search assistance and increase perceived value. Let's take a look, though, at what the emerging trend is. This is certainly what the United States Department of Labor believes. They don't believe we have a different set of services, where there's one set of services for employers and one set of services for job seekers. That what we really need to develop are what we could call dual customer products. Products that directly connect employers and job seekers. When you don't just get job postings, but you get job postings that reflect the characteristics of who you have, that's a direct connection. When you contact employers to promote a specific candidate, that's a direct connection. When you invite employers to come to your office location as more and more employers begin to do pre-hire testing, that if we offer employers the opportunity for us to conduct that testing, that is a direct connection service. Whenever we begin to promote hiring subsidies and training subsidies that are available for our specific job seekers, then that is a direct connection service. The hiring subsidies, the on-the-job training subsidies, the employer testing, the employer hiring events, the job development, those all require direct connection with employers. And one of the things we need to think about is how to grow the services on this page, because as we will discuss, self-directed job search does not work well for everyone. So let's begin to have that discussion, and I want to share with you a fairly simple diagram that talks about the 4 different strategies that programs use to connect their job seekers to employers. If you have the job seekers on one side and you have the employers on the other, there are basically 4 ways to bring together supply and demand. The one that we've been focused on so far, and that sounds like is the strategy that most of you use, is what I'm going to refer to as strategy A, which is where we support the job seeker in direct job search. That is one very strong strategy, and it's actually the strategy that's most used across the country. There is another way, though, to connect job seekers with employers, and that's where we help B. Strategy C and strategy D are what most people would call a labor exchange function. However, strategy C is about us connecting to employers by promoting specific job candidates, and strategy D is getting job openings to whom we can refer job seekers. These are 4 major strategies. Any good program will probably do something in all 4 of them. However, most programs will have a predominant choice. It is important that that strategy choice be based upon a number of different factors. What works best depends on the local economy. When the unemployment rate is high, some strategies work really well, but when the unemployment rate begins to go down, other strategies work better. So we need to think some about your local economy. We need to think some about who your job seekers are, and unfortunately, the most important of all may be that we have a strategy choice based not upon economy or job seeker, but on the reality of a reduced resource environment. So we're going to look at all 4 of these and look at the pluses and look at the minuses for each one of them. We're going to talk some about how it is that we can make our choices within a limited resource kind of world. I do want to just bring up a couple of points, though, about making a strategic choice. Political problem for us. Have you ever thought about all of the employers you've actually helped through helping quality job seekers find their own jobs, but the employers don't even know about it at all? I worry about the fact that sometimes we have not expanded our constituency to a broader private sector marketplace, which sometimes we'll need to be able to find the political support for our funding. As I mentioned earlier, we have to ask, do our customers believe they are getting something valuable from us? As we move to a strategy which is predominantly focused only on self-service, do employers believe they're getting something they couldn't do by themselves? It may have been a time when resource rooms with their computers were valuable to a huge number of customers because they didn't have computers at home. There may have been a time where doing job search for job boards was something we could provide because people couldn't do it by themselves. But more and more job seekers can use many of these self-help tools without us. So the question is what can they get from us that they can't do by themselves? Because we always want to add value. So let's dig in, look at all 4 strategies, and see what some of the considerations might be as you're beginning to decide which strategy is right for you. Let's first start with strategy A, with job seeker self-service and self-directed job search. This strategy works really well when the economy is growing and the unemployment rate is low. The principal reason it works is not necessarily because people are good job seekers, but simply that employers in many cases so need to hire individuals that they'll hire, quote, imperfect candidates and imperfect job seekers. Customers who are currently employed and those in the very early stages of unemployment. However, I don't have to tell you what you already know, is that the longer someone is unemployed, the more likely it is that employers begin to see them as tainted. Many of you are probably aware that there's a number of places across the country where states have had to enact laws that says that employers cannot discriminate against unemployed applicants. If they are a job seeker that in fact is employed, then in many cases employers believe they have talent. And so consequently it works well with those kinds of customers. It works well with customers that have good, strong work experience and good skills. It also really works well with people who have really good job search skills. I think you would agree with me that in some cases, people are better job seekers than they are workers. However, there are people who are better workers than they are job seekers. In self-directed job search, those that have good self-marketing skills always do well. People who know how to create good structure and are highly self-motivated do well with this strategy. And as I mentioned earlier, that it does well for people who do have few barriers to employment. Before I move on, I'd like to see a show of hands. How many of you believe that most of your customers meet these characteristics? Most of your customers meet. Okay, now let me ask you, how many of you believe that most of your customers do not meet these characteristics? Would you please raise your hand? Wow, a great number of you. Well, I mean, that's the question we've got to ask. If most of our customers do not meet the characteristics of those customers who do best with this strategy, maybe we have to ask, what are the other strategies we might want to choose to draw on? Now, here's the sad truth, is even if your customers do not meet these characteristics, this still may be the strategy you choose. And the simple reason is that if we do not have many staff, we do not have the opportunity to have dedicated employer staff, this strategy is the lowest cost, the least staff intensive, and even if it does not work well for all customers, it may be the strategy we need to choose. So consequently, we'll talk some later about how it is we can improve the quality of our self-service and how we can improve helping our customers find their own jobs, even if it is not the best choice for them. Let's take a look at the second strategy and some of the pluses and minuses of that. This whole concept of facilitating and helping who are experiencing labor shortages, who want lots of different methods to recruit candidates. This works well if you have a wide variety of job seekers that have the skills that employers want, but it also works well with training graduates who are in highly demand occupations. We need to promote those graduates. I'd like to give you an example of that. I was working with a recent program in Texas who had 4 people who were graduating as dental hygienists. The staff basically called every dentist in the area and said, "We have these training graduates. Would you be interested in seeing any of them?" This whole concept about how it is we promote our individual candidates is something we can do, particularly if we have sent people to demand occupations that are highly in demand. This strategy works well when you have employers who are in continuous recruitment. It also works well in the case of multiple entry-level seasonal jobs with high turnover because employers have to recruit all of the time. There's probably very few one-stop centers in the country that do not have FedEx who want to, in fact, set up in their center at Christmas time because that's when they're wanting to actively recruit. This was a couple of years ago, but it happens every 10 years. Whenever the Census Bureau wants to, in fact, recruit part-time, seasonal, temporary kinds of jobs, they always want to set up in the center to recruit candidates. The question is this something that we can do with these employers and with other employers? This strategy can also be implemented when you do not have many staff. Few minutes. Let's look at the next strategy, which is strategy C. And this is really about job development. It works best when there's higher unemployment and the job market is very hidden. It works well with job-seeking customers that have significant barriers to employment who also sometimes have been unsuccessful with self-directed job search. It also works well when the job seekers we have are eligible for hiring incentives such as WOTC, or when we are attempting to promote OJT, because in this particular strategy, we don't promote the subsidy, but we promote the job seeker. And the subsidy is used to close the sale, not to initiate it. To make this strategy work, it requires the staff have strong ongoing customer relationships with their job-seeking customers, because no staff feel comfortable in referring someone to an employer they don't know well, particularly if they are tapping their own network. I will just say that across the country there is an emerging trend toward the expectation that job seeker staff will not just facilitate self-directed job search, but will actually promote candidates and contact employers on their behalf. And some of that has to do with the fact that we still have a higher unemployment economy, and as we will talk about in a few minutes, the job market becomes increasingly hidden, and just applying online and just looking at job boards is becoming insufficient in order to be able to find a job. The final strategy we'll take a look at has to do with what we might call the labor exchange strategy, which is where we take a look at the strategy that works best in a time of higher unemployment, where employers can be very from employers. Many employers should want and do want this kind of service in a time of high unemployment, because when they advertise a job, they're besieged with applicants, and they sometimes want us to act as screeners of that talent. This strategy is almost always valuable to smaller businesses that don't have strong human resource capacity, and where the small business owner is having to do the recruitment, the screening, the interviewing, the hiring. And so in many cases, this particular strategy works well if you wish to be focused on how to help smaller businesses. The one thing that is true is this strategy works best when you have a staff person or staff people who have as their only responsibility to work with employers. What's important here, though, is that employer staff recognize that they have dual customership here and should be recruiting employers that reflect the nature of the job seekers in the program. So those are the 4 strategies that you may choose to use. How did you decide to implement the strategy that you used in your program? Has it been based predominantly on the economy, on the characteristics of your job seeker? Has it been based upon the limitations of your staff resources? Just always done it one way, or are you really not sure? Oh, wow, this is interesting, huh? Give a little bit more time for the results here. This is a little different than I would have anticipated, but I'm certainly glad to see the results. Okay, all right. Well, let me just say this. The fact that you are overwhelmingly, predominantly responding to job seeker characteristics is a good thing for me. I do want you to just reflect, though, without making any criticism, just a reflection, is that when I asked you whether or not self-directed job search fit most of the characteristics of your job-seeking customers, many of you said no. If you, in fact, have many job seekers who have many challenges, then that means that maybe self-directed job search is not the best. But I do believe that we have to wrap some of this strategy around job seeker characteristics. I'm not surprised that 1/5 of you have made this decision based upon staffing and resources. That's just a cruel reality. The only thing I would want to highlight here, though, is that person who believes that strategy is always point in time specific, and we can't help people get jobs if we do not have a strategy that reflects the current economic situation. So that's very interesting to me. So I think that's pretty important. By the way, just something you might want to know, most research indicates that once the unemployment rate gets more than 6%, then the nature of the labor market changes significantly. So I don't know what the unemployment rate is on in your area, but if it's higher than 6%, and I'm assuming that's true for many of you, then you should recognize that self-directed job search begins to be less effective as a strategy in that particular kind of economy, and you might want to think about some of the other strategies. So this is how you made the decision as to what strategy to use. Let's ask another poll question here, which is, which one do you most frequently use? In other words, the first one was, why did you choose the strategy? This one is, which one do you most frequently use? And I think based on the other poll questions, I have some idea where the results might come out here, but we'll see. So again, self-directed job search is the overwhelming choice here. But it does look like people are, to some degree, doing B, C, and D. And again, I know the question here is most frequently, probably all of you do all of these to some degree. Okay. Well, I think are the ones that we use most frequently, the ones that works best in this particular kind of economy. And so finally, let's ask one more poll question on the next page. This question was around which one we use most frequently, but now I want to know, which one do you think is most successful? Which one of these 4 strategies do you believe would result in most of your job seekers finding jobs. Which one would be the best for you to achieve an improved employment outcome for your job-seeking customers? These results are coming in here. See what we've got. Well, this is interesting, huh? When I asked which one did you think was going to bring the best result, the self-directed job search got the lowest, even though that seems to be the most frequent strategy. I'm impressed, by the way, that 21 of you said that helping employers recruit your job seekers is one of the best strategies. And I got to tell you, I think that's a big strategy too. And the reason why I think that that's a strategy some of you might want to consider is it doesn't have job seekers. And the same is true with strategy C here. So I think the takeaway from this is many of us are doing self-directed job search. We need to improve it. It's not effective with all of our job-seeking customers, and we need to grow strategy B and C if we want to have a more vibrant, value-added environment. So those are the 4 strategies, and what we're going to do now is to begin to look at ideas on how we might be able to improve each of these 4 strategies. The first one we are going to look at is self-directed job search. In general, there are 4 value-added services in terms of self-directed job search. Giving people good quality information that includes job leads, not necessarily just jobs that are already posted, but job leads, places that people might want to look. And the one we will focus on in a moment, one value-added informational service, is giving people good insight into how job getting is changing. I think that particularly for people who have not looked for a job in a long time, and by the way, that includes some of the individuals who in fact are staff in our programs, is that if you haven't looked for a job to individuals in their job search is to help them bring structure to their job search. There's pretty many ways to do this, and I know most of you do this, but this is helping people plan a day-by-day guide of what they're going to do in terms of their job search so that they have a purpose every day. A very simple thing to do in terms of individuals who work in the resource area is that at every visit that a customer makes to use the resource area, the staff person can open the visit by simply asking, what is your goal for this visit? And then to make sure at the end of every visit to the resource area to say, what did you accomplish and what is the next step? So that even when you are doing self-service, you are helping people have structure to their activity. Many of you probably, particularly for dislocated workers, conduct jobs clubs. I think that that's an important service because I think support is very difficult when you are in fact looking for a job. And then finally, another value-added service is that many of you help improve people's resumes. We're going to talk about how some of the tools are changing, including the use of social media sites in job search, but it is value-added when we help people get tools. The one I want to spend some time on is job search advice. Value is always perceived when advice is customized. Value is perceived when the information is current and useful, and people want new ideas. So I want to talk some and get your perspective ways that job getting is changing, but here's at least a few for you to think about. First of all, more and more employers are recruiting using many, many different methods. They are advertising many places, but as we will discuss in a moment, the real truth is most jobs are never listed at all. Moreover, the most recent statistics show that of all jobs posted, a full 29% of them are never filled. So the whole way that employers are recruiting is beginning to change. As more and more people submit applications online, by email, resume submission, it simply means that many employers are conducting dating games. They're conducting matches based upon keywords. Some of the most effective resumes now open at the headline with keywords because, in fact, the quantity of applicants means that employers are using electronic screening and not personal resume screening. The simple truth is you can have a beautiful resume, but if it does not match the keywords electronically, then you're out of the running before you even get to have your resume seen. More and more people require online applications for all jobs. As we mentioned, email resume submission is very different than the old way of just having a pretty resume. I think number 5 is very significant. Criminal background checks, credit checks, employers by almost second nature now, before hiring anyone, conduct a Google search on that individual. More and more employers conduct testing as a prelude to even deciding who will be hired. Sometimes it's skill testing, sometimes it's job fit testing. And boy, let me just say what I know you already know, has interviewing changed? I'm sure that I'm one of the older individuals who are in the webinar today, but some of you might remember when this used to be fairly simple. You'd go for one interview, do a good kiss-up, make a good impression, and then maybe you get the job. Oh my goodness, how many interviews do people have to go to now? Matter of fact, the most recent research by Dun & Bradstreet says that it can be up to 4.2 months between the time a job is advertised and when someone is actually hired. And it's simply because the process keeps getting more complicated. By the time you do pre-employment testing, you have an initial phone screening interview, you have then an initial in-person screening interview, then you have an interview with the potential hirer, then you have a team interview, and then finally you have the decision interview. Sometimes it's 4 to 5 interviews prior to hire. If we could. I'd love to hear from you. How do you think job getting is changing in your community? And you can choose as many of these as you want, but I just love to hear from you. What do you think are some of the ways that job getting is changing? Wow. So it looks like many of you do believe that many of these methods are changing. Wow. The first one, I certainly would agree with you. Who you know is more important than ever. This is what we're going to talk about more in a moment. The job market becomes ever more hidden. Matter of fact, the most recent research shows that 82% of all jobs that are actually filled are never advertised in the public at all. What's unfortunate about that is we sometimes work with job seekers who don't have connections, that don't really know folks who in fact can get them in the door. However, One of the things that is true is, what does it mean in the new world to question of how you tap the hidden job market and how you get to, quote, know someone, even if you do not know someone, is pretty important. I think everyone would agree with me that applying online is a very different task. By the way, I'll just tell you some of the research on that. Some of the online applications are timed. Some of the applications in terms of online require spell checking. There's a whole range of different kinds of advice that we need to do and give to our job seekers about effectively applying online. So it looks to me like you believe job getting is changing. And certainly the question to ask is do your workshops and does your job search advice change to reflect the reality of how job getting is changing? By the way, this isn't a poll question, but I would love to hear. I would love to hear your perspective on this. How many of you would be interested in a future webinar, perhaps, on giving better job search advice and on some of the ways that job getting is changing? That's not really the focus of this webinar. That's worth noting. That's really good. Great. Good. This is something we have to work on all the time because the job getting changing methodology is changing all of the time. Let's spend some time for a moment here as we're thinking about job search advice in terms of how job getting is changing in terms of employers. And I've already mentioned some of these. Most jobs are never listed at all. That's almost always true, but it's even more true in times of high unemployment because employers don't want to be besieged by applicants. What the big change is here is that more and more employers, even if they are not seeking referrals from individuals they know, are beginning to not list jobs, but to simply go on the web and conduct proactive searches, where they begin to look for people who they think can do the job, even those individuals who have not applied for the job, and then to do headhunting. The internet makes headhunting possible not just for headhunters, but for all employers. And so one of the questions is maybe more and more people need to have a strong web presence in order to be discovered by employers, even if in fact they are not making direct application. And this has to do with social networking sites and with building a strong web presence. I thought you might be interested in a survey from employers. Now, this may not reflect the employers in your community. Survey, which they simply ask employers, which of these social networking sites do they use to find candidates? And a full 95% of them said that LinkedIn was something that they have used to find candidates. Now, this isn't just an issue of selecting candidates. This is of finding candidates. And I didn't include this particular finding on this page, but something you might be interested in. But 84% of all of the employers surveyed said that they intended to use these social networking sites more in terms of finding talent as opposed to finding jobs. So consequently, what that means is that we need to give some good advice in terms of creating web presence. And I'm not going to spend time on all of these because we have limited time, but I want to just make points on the obvious that I'm sure you probably already know. One of the first things we should do with job seekers is to sit them down and to do a Google self-search and to conduct their own background checks. This is what employers are going to do, and we need to do it first, both to clean it up, to take off those party pictures off of Facebook and off those kinds of social networking sites that may not create the best image for us. I want to make a point that many people think that social networking is predominantly about LinkedIn. I will share with you that for many entry-level workers, that I'm sure you could second. But I worked with one individual who, in fact, thought they wanted resume assistance, but by the time I got around to helping them with their resume, they already got a job. How did they get the job? They simply posted the fact that they wanted the job on their Facebook page, and one of their, quote, friends made the connection for them. So that spending as much time on web presence as on resume connection as resume development is probably good advice. More and more job seekers are creating their own personal website with virtual portfolios so that when they develop resumes, they don't have to be cluttered, but they can be hot linked to their website. And by the way, you can get free website hosting on Google so that this isn't a high cost kind of activity. And sometimes we need to make our resumes more interactive and not just live in the world of old paper resumes. One more quick story. I was in Nevada, where the unemployment rate for construction workers is huge. I did get to meet a gentleman who was in construction, who did drywall, who recently got a job. The way he got his job is he did a YouTube presentation of him drywalling. Having a YouTube presentation of a particular talent, a particular skill, if you're a salesperson, showing how you, in fact, would make a sales presentation, and including that as a link in your resume is another way to create a web presence. So, I mean, I could do a whole webinar on this and have. Create a web presence where they can be discovered and not just search. So that's a few ideas on strategy A. Let's see if we can get a few ideas on strategy B. This has to do with those strategies that some of you identified as the believing that it would be most useful, which is how do we directly connect employers to our job seekers. My own personal experience is general purpose job fairs are not very effective. Many people attend, but not many people get jobs. What has been proven to work and is increasingly seen as effective is where we invite employers to come to our center to interview candidates that we have pre-screened, we have invited, and we have prepared. This is different than just putting a sign on the door that says XYZ company interviewing on Wednesday. This says that we meet with the company, we identify what they want in terms of job seekers, we contact those job seekers, we screen them, and we prepare them for interviews. You'll get much better results from this approach than just having a general job fair. There are a couple of major ways to promote your job seekers. One way to promote your job seeker is through what I call talent portfolios, which are simply single paragraph descriptions of the job seekers you have. Frequently e-blasting those descriptions of job seekers to target employers or posting them on your website is one effective and low staff intensity activity. And that is one local program who have people graduating from training where they have a meet and greet event, which we might call Talent on Parade, where we invite local employers that are the most likely to be interested in those training in demand occupation candidates and having an informal opportunity to meet and greet. So this is where we are facilitating networking, not making a referral, but just bringing together employers with potential job seekers. By the way, This would also be possible with local trade associations, with the Society for Human Resource Managers, where we simply invite candidates to make presentations to them so that people in fact know who is currently available. So that's just some ideas on strategy B. The issue of job development is important because some customers just can't self-help. It's not because they're not trying, but in many cases they have more barriers than the market will bear. Job development requires you to only develop jobs for those you can trust because your name will be attached. So this is most appropriate where you have an ongoing relationship with the job seeker. I do think that one of the things we need to recognize, and I've mentioned this already, is that we need to make sure that when we give advice that we're coaching people on how to get hired, not just how to apply. Because the big new trick is not to apply, but to somehow convert that application through effective interviewing and other is something that takes time, but probably has good high return value. I thought you might be interested in a couple of things, though, about when we do talk to a job seeker about a possible job opening. One of the things that happens is people tend to ask our customers, do you think you can do this job? A much more effective way to present a job opening is to go down qualification by qualification by qualification. And after each qualification, ask the job seeker how they are qualified. To a large degree, what you are doing when you do that kind of retail qualification by qualification is that you are giving job seekers interview practice. And it is important that people ingrain in their own mind what they have. This has always been effective. By the way, this is effective for cover letters as well as for interviewing, is to simply say to employers, here's what you're looking for, here's what I have. Here's what you're looking for, here's what I have. That kind of tit for tat helps employers see qualifications. In many cases, people talk about what they have, but they do not relate it back to what is required. So when you make a referral and you're in fact sitting down with a job seeker to discuss a job, this retail one by one is very good practice for them. One of the things I've always found interesting is most one that is that many staff that are career counselors and others do not have those tip sheets on their desk. The best time to give someone a tip sheet is at the time you make a referral. And by the way, it's certainly appropriate for us to use those tip sheets in our one-on-one counseling, to give it to the customer and say, which of these tips do you think will work for you? I don't know about you, but I think job search is really scary. I think the fear of rejection is high. I think there's a whole bunch of different things that goes on when people begin to get ready for an interview. The one thing that I will say to you is that we can help people not be so anxious. And I just wish that after we've talked to a job seeker about their job search, that we would end every meeting with a review of their strengths. We need to cheerlead and to coach, but we need to cheerlead at least as much as we coach. And I do think this issue of at the time we talk about a job opening is that we want to make sure that people follow through. And one of the ways that people follow through is when they have confidence. So in the meeting, always, with the discussion of what people have to offer, you have a great smile. You'll be wonderful for that customer service position. You want to make sure that you help people recognize that they have strengths so that they feel confident in terms of applying. The final strategy we'll look at in terms of adding value is this strategy D. which is how we in fact refer job. The greatest value for our job seekers when we have job listings that no one else has. More and more across the country, it is expected that those that are assigned to work with employers, in the case of those programs that have employer-dedicated staff, that one of their jobs is to find job openings that exist no place else. Because if the job listing is already posted on multiple job boards, have we really added value? One of the ways to add value to this process of job order collection, though, is to give employers good consultation on their listings. Particularly small employers oftentimes do not know how to list jobs effectively. We can promise, though, that if they list jobs effectively, that we can help them streamline their recruitment of their candidates. Just one other final point on this is that one of the ways to add value is that our employers, that when we make referrals to employers, our candidates come with skill verification. Skill verification really has to do with being able to prove that people have the skills they have. I don't know. In Illinois, do you use work keys? I guess I should know that. Let me just see a show of hands. Is work keys something that we use in Illinois? Isn't that interesting? You know, a lot of states around the country have moved to using work keys. It looks like some of you are too. What work keys really is a way for employers to know that people have skills as opposed to just seeing a self things like Prove It. And the reality is perhaps we need to think some about how we use those assessment tools, not just for the purpose of determining which program is right for our customers, but how do we use those assessment tools to give proof to employers that individuals have the skills that they say they have. When in fact job seekers come with proof of skills as opposed to just statement of skills, that gives them added value. So you might want to think some about how skill assessment is not just a program placement tool, but how really skills assessment and skills verification is something that can help more individuals get jobs. If you're going to do strategy D, there's really three elements here. There's the element of finding job orders, matching candidates to job orders, and then referring individuals to job orders. All of these need to probably be improved. And I'm going to skip a couple of pages and begin to talk some about the referral process. If you are going to use strategy D, we need to find more staff-assisted, suppressed exclusive job orders, but we need to make sure that we are proactively seeking job orders that meet the characteristics of our customers. When we get a job order we cannot fill, not only is that a waste of time, but it also means that many employers will not have expectations met. Sometimes this is confusing for people, but what is simply true is that many employers, when they give us a job order, don't think we are just listening and targeting job orders that meet the characteristics of our talent. That means that you should never initiate on an employer campaign that without first taking a look and inventorying the current job-seeking customers you have. One of the things across the country that's emerging, and I know many of you do not have employer services as your principal focus, but in the past, many employer service staff have been evaluated by how many job orders did they get. Well, the goal is not to get more job orders. The goal is to get more job orders that can be filled. The goal is not to make more referrals, but to, in fact, to make referrals that convert to hire. So if you're in leadership and you have employer staff, you need to think a lot about what you're holding people responsible for. Because when you, in fact, fulfill job orders, as opposed to just getting more of them, you're really providing connection. And one of the ways we get more done with less is we make sure that we get job orders that we can fill. And so if you're running a welfare to work program, you probably know the 5 most common occupations that people get jobs in. We should be working with employers that have a predominance of those kinds of jobs. The goal is not to work with all employers, but to work with employers we can serve well. And those employers we can serve well are those with whom we have job seekers to fill the jobs they have. I know that's fairly evident. However, I will just share with you that in many places across the country, people put their job order solicitation on a very different track than who their job seekers are. The reason this is so important is because for a long period complain that we send them the wrong person, we send them no one at all, which by the way is sometimes as frequent a complaint as wrong one, that it takes too long to send anyone, and it does not appear to the employer that anyone is taking responsibility. As we're thinking some about improving our referral process, we'll want to address all 4 of those complaints. We'll want to ensure that we make quality referrals of the right candidate, that when we get a job order, we're actually going to fill it, not just post it, that we're going to respond quickly, and that we're going to continually keep the employer updated on the process. You got to remember that you can be doing everything to help the employer, but if the employer doesn't know you're acting, then it appears to them that nothing is happening at all. So as you're thinking about your improvement process, you're going to want to correct these 4 perceptions. And again, they may not be true for you, but almost all of the research shows that those are the 4 major employers' complaints in terms of when they work with us. There are 5 phases to the referral to hire process. The first phase is pick the right candidate. The second phase is to prepare the candidate. The third phase is to package the candidate for the employer. The 4th one is present the packaged candidate to the employer. And then finally, mapping activity is not just to eliminate waste, but to add value. So in our very limited time, what I'm going to do as the conclusion part of our webinar is to talk about some ideas in improving each of these process steps. That way, when you, after this webinar, begin to map your process, there might be a few ideas for you to think about. First of all, the process step of picking candidates simply means that we want to, in fact, choose the right candidate for the right employer. I've mentioned this consistently, but I'll just say it one more time. You can't pick the right candidate if you got the wrong job order. So you have to start in terms of targeting job orders that you can fill. One of the most common mistakes that is made is people take job orders that list job qualifications, but there is insufficient information to make a good match. It is as important to ask an employer how they will be hiring someone. What is their hiring process as what is required? Will there be background checks? If so, what kinds of background checks? The more we understand about the hiring process and not just the qualifications, the more likely it is that we can do a good job in screening our candidates and meeting employer expectations. As we mentioned, you'll want to keep employers updated throughout the process. Be contacting them at least weekly to let them know what we're doing. Out of touch is out of mind. Absence does not make the heart grow fonder. Absence makes people forget. And so that's very important. We just want to keep them updated all the time. In general, there should be one person in your organization who acts as the gateway to referrals, because you can't afford to send inappropriate candidates. And for those job listings that are most valuable, those that we have reached out to employers and said that we will in fact send only quality candidates, then someone on staff needs to be the keeper of quality to make sure that only candidates are sent that meet the requirements. One thing I might want to note, I'm a little surprised at this, and it may not be true in your location, but some places where they have separate employer staff and separate job seeker staff, sometimes people are being referred to employers where in fact the candidate has never been met with at all. I don't believe that you should send a candidate to be interviewed that you have not interviewed. So the first phase is to pick the right candidate, and you can't pick the right candidate if you haven't at least met with them. And then the next step is to prepare the candidate. Because just because we pick someone who meets the qualifications, it does not necessarily mean that people are prepared to be hired. So as we said earlier, you'll want to go through qualification by qualification. And this is the point that I've been emphasizing. Just because you meet the qualifications, not just to, we don't do it to screen out applicants, but to help applicants. It's important that we know to what degree they're going to be able to survive the selection process. And it does no good for a job candidate to apply for a job that they will not be hired for. That's not helping people. That's just wasting their time. So we need to make sure that we know what are the hiring qualifications. And to make sure that we use the same method to assess our referrals that employers use to assess who to hire. I want to just spend a moment on this one. In one local area that I work with in Texas, they have a large number of retail jobs. They have a large number of candidates that are appropriate for retail jobs. They have one simple requirement. We will refer you to no employer with one of the retail jobs that have been listed to us until you spend at least one day in a customer service seminar. Because they want to make sure the people they refer have at least some skills that are exclusive to you, that are not some job that job seekers can apply to directly without you making a referral. What should we require for people to do prior to receiving a referral? Maybe there's a certain skill class, but most importantly of all, should people ever be referred to an employer who's not ready to be interviewed? If they have not interviewed well with you, they probably will not interview well with the employer. So consequently, should you require that people attend the interview workshop prior to receiving a referral? More and more, we need to think about how we in fact prepare people to be hired, not just how we give them job leads. After you have in fact picked and prepared candidates, then we want to package the candidate. Here's the first truth. A lousy paper resume does not just reflect on the job candidate, but it also reflects on you. And to the degree we're going to improve our relationship with employers and our value perception, we need to recognize that employers hold us responsible for the quality of the resume that we are sending to them as much as they own the responsibility to the job seeker. One of the things they found in Nevada is that when we send all resumes at one time for jobs for which we are referring, that there's better results than when we send them one at a time, and that when we put those resumes in a presentation folder so it we present our candidates to employers. We can do this best in person. And what we need to do is to literally promote our candidates. That we need to do just as I was recommending earlier, say to employers, this is what you want, this is what the candidate has. The purpose of the promotion process is not to promote hire, but to promote an interview. People will only be hired after an interview, so we have to promote the interview first, and it's step by step. So very quickly, that's the 5 phases of making a quality referral that converts to hire. Many of those things you probably already do, but it's worth thinking about as you're beginning to improve your referral process. So let me just ask you, I know I did those very quickly. This is another survey question. Which of these referral to hire process steps do you think you need to most improve? In other words, in terms of what you're doing, which of these do you think you need to think more about? I mean, all 5 could be continuously improved, and all organizations need to do that all the time. But which of these particularly do you think we need to do a little better on? Looks like the results are still coming in here. I would agree with these results. I mean, this would be my general impression in terms of places that I've worked. I think this issue of not just sending someone to a job interview, but getting them ready for an interview, I think all of these prepare questions is really a good thing. I think we've spent more time on thinking of search. I know that's fairly evident, but I think it's a big shift in some ways. I do think packaging is important. I think how we present our work sometimes is as important as the work itself. So all 5 areas can be improved. I'm hoping after the webinar that those of you from a single agency will get together, map your process, and to see how you believe it can be improved. So basically, here's what I hope you got from today. These are the things I would recommend you to do next. First of all, go back and take a look at the 4 strategies and decide which strategy is best for you. I would urge you to think some about your local economy and how different strategies work in different economies. No matter which strategies you choose, I hope you got a few ideas on how to add value. These strategies are never forever. When the unemployment rate goes down, it might be a while, but when the unemployment rate goes down, then certainly we need to re-emphasize self-directed job search. But as long as the unemployment rate is high, we may need to examine some new strategies. You want to make sure your job search advice is current. No doubt what's going to happen more and more, it's ever increasing, that more and more the job market will become hidden. To get jobs, they're going to have to be discovered on the web. They're going to have to develop some kind of method of networking. I do think, and many of you said this in the survey, we need to spend more time on targeted hiring events, learning how to promote our job seekers, and then beginning to think some about how to improve our referral to hire process. So that's a whirlwind tour of some of the ways to connect job seekers with employers. And what I'd love to hear from you is some of your thoughts on today's webinar. What did we talk about that had some value for you? What are some of the things that you do to connect job seekers and employers? What is some of the advice that you give to job seekers that has worked? What's some of the things you think we need to improve? So this would be a great time to share any thoughts, reflections, ideas, best practices, questions, other things you'd like to know some about in terms of what people are doing across the country. You can feel free to use the chat bar, put a few things down. Well, I'd love to hear from you. Did we talk about any ideas today that you thought might be valuable for you? Any particular takeaways in terms of the ideas that you thought might work best? Looks like we got a couple people typing here. Waiting for the comments to come in here. There's a lot of people typing, so. You thought the social media was interesting. I do think that's important. Social media, so you might want to draw on those. I do think that this is something of great interest and it's emerging. I just want to one more time say, many people think the social media issue is just about LinkedIn and professionals. I think more and more it has to do with all job seekers, regardless of job type. This person says they like the fresh approach on developing the job seeker. I think that's right. I think the big shift is that it's not just about employer services and finding job openings. It's about preparing people for it. So I think that's good. I'm glad you found that at least interesting and useful. What else we got here? More people are typing. We'll give them just a moment here. Let's see. When the opportunity is available, we connect clients directly with employers, but many employers are reluctant to do so. We are working on those partnerships. I think that's right. And I'll tell you something that I'm sure you would agree with, that the most important issue is to choose those employers who most want to hire our job seekers. It's not just the employers we want to work with, but who most are targeting. So I think that's true. Lorraine said that she liked the personal branding and web presence. I will just also say to you, we didn't mention this on this, is I believe every job seeker needs a business card. And by the way, you can go on the web and there's many sites where you in fact can print business cards at no cost. I think business cards provide confidence for job seekers. It gives them a way to network. And this is just another value-added thing we can do that doesn't cost much that job seekers perceive value in. So that would be another thing that we talked about that might be of importance for you. Looks like we have a few more people typing in comments here. Let's see, this person says we assist with the application hiring process for employers in order to encourage partnership. I think that's right. I like this. Dana said that she thinks that social media is a good source of introducing yourself and also a good self-interviewing tool. Social media is a good source for a business card. I think that's right. Gene, I agree with you. This isn't just for professionals. Professionals need to be out there, but it's certainly for think that for many employers, the issue of proactive job search will be the big one. Looks like we got a couple more comments here. Yes, Mike, I'll do this real quickly. Mike wants to know, can you make suggestions on how to handle employer-referred candidates for OJTs? First of all, I need to make sure I understand the question. Are you talking about where employers refer candidates to us for OJT, what some people call reverse referrals? If that's what you're saying, then we got to be really careful. Because, in fact, there's nothing wrong with that, but we have to make sure that the job seeker actually has not been hired and actually is eligible for the program. That's what got us into trouble last time. Probably related, Mike, and maybe I'm not attempting to avoid the question, but if you have lots of employer referrals of candidates for OJT, that may be very well because we have sold the OJT program as opposed to a candidate. I recommend that you think some about the strategy of where you do not sell OJT, but you sell a candidate who may be eligible for OJT. That's what I mean by moving to a candidate promotion as opposed to a program promotion approach. But we've got to be very careful about employer referrals. Closer, not a deal initiator. So I don't know if that's useful, but when you begin to have employers refer candidates for OJT, the concern is that monitoring findings will show that this is the candidate the employer would have hired without OJT, and that gets us in trouble. So always tell the person, not the program. The program sometimes stigmatizes people, all of those kinds of things. So you know, Mike, when we were talking about doing talent portfolios, I would send talent portfolios and to say some of these individuals may be eligible for on-the-job training. That's very different than saying, come get your hot, fresh OJT. Okay, looks like we got a couple more comments and then we'll begin to do our wrap here. Looks like Danita's typing something in here. Jean's typing something in. Okay, well, your comments are certainly welcome. I hope you did at least get a few ideas. It's been my pleasure to work with you today. I hope you will take a look at your strategies, that you're taking away a few things. Oh, Jean, just real quickly, Jean said that Mantricon has had success in work experience program and convincing employers to give our customers a chance to work for that employer. Customers that would not be hired otherwise. As they I think work experience is a great thing. I think that, by the way, that work experience is really tryout employment. I know you know that. But it's another way to get your foot in the door. One of the things we're going to be looking at, I think, in the future is more and more how work experience and on-the-job training will be growing in importance, because more and more, I believe, we are moving to employer-sponsored training and not just classroom training. So I think that's great, Gene, and I would second it. It looks like a number of other people are using it as well. Okay, well, I hope you got a few ideas today. We'd love to have your feedback on the webinar. Thank you so very much for coming. I hope it had some value. And if you could just respond to these two poll questions, we'll wrap up our time with each other. Thank you again for coming. It was very, very much appreciated. Love working with all my friends in Illinois, and I hope I get to do so again.
The meeting is now over. All the participants have been disconnected.